Obviously absurd. There's God right in the clouds, Santa in the sky, white dude, all the biblical characters in the Bible, children's books, white people, even though they were in a part of the world where there are no white people, right? So even though we don't have that in our home, my child has nonetheless already at the age of 7 somehow internalized the idea that the creation source of the universe, whether taken in religious terms or humanistic and more naturalistic terms, is somehow closer to her than to Morgan Freeman, See, what this tells us is that we can be conditioned to have these responses even though we don't even know we have them, right? Because why? Advertising works. Advertising works. What do I mean by that? Think about a couple weeks ago, Super Bowl, right? These companies spend hundreds of millions of dollars to sell you a bunch of stuff, right? So they're trying to sell you Sprint plan, they're trying to sell you certain types of toilet paper, toothpaste, beer, Diet Coke, whatever the hell Drake was trying to sell, right? They were selling you all this stuff, and these companies spend like $100 million. I think that was the Sprint ad, was Drake, right? $100 million or more to try to take out these ads and sell you consumer products. Why? Because they understand that the more you see their ad, the better odds are that you will buy their junk, right? And that happens. We know actually in the world of marketing, there is a theory called the rule of 12, right? And what the rule of 12 says is that when you've seen an ad a dozen times, that's the moment where you're exponentially more likely to go buy the product, right? So like the first couple times you see it, you're like, sometimes if you're like me, you look at the ad, you're like, what was that? I don't even know what that was an ad for. Like, these people are stupid. I'm not gonna buy there. I don't even know what the hell that was. These people are idiots. Oh, you think they're idiots? They just spent millions of dollars. You think they're just throwing money away? No, they know what they're doing. They give you a vague, innocuous ad the first few times, because then you'll be the 5th time, 6th time, you'll be like, I gotta pay attention to that. That was crazy the first 4 times. Now all of a sudden you're looking at it, you're like, oh, Taco Bell Crunch Wrap. Breakfast Crunch Wrap, right? And at first you're still like, that's ridiculous. Why would I want a taco wrapped up like a burrito with the egg and a piece of sausage in it at 6 o'clock in the damn morning? Why do I need that? Nobody ever wanted that. Reverse the clock 5 years before they had that. You think anybody was lobbying for a breakfast crunch wrap at 6 in the morning? Any of y'all write a letter to Taco Bell like, you know what we need at 6 a.m. is a taco wrapped up like a burrito with an egg and a piece of sausage in it. Nobody was asking for that, but some genius at Taco Bell was like, watch this. And he creates the product, or she does, they create an ad campaign for it. Now you got folks around the block, they're like, I'm not eating Egg McMuffins anymore. Screw Egg McMuffins. I'm all about a breakfast crunch wrap. And they sold you on it because you saw the ad 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, and then folks started trying it. Now, if that can work with Taco Bell, it can work with toilet paper, toothpaste, tennis shoes, cell phones, candy, right? Think about how much easier it is to sell you on a racial stereotype, because you've seen that ad, metaphorically speaking, more than just 12 times, right? We've been exposed to those stereotypes way more than 12 times by the time we're young adults. We've been exposed to that stuff all of our lives, and it takes root in us whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And if we don't acknowledge it, see, it's very hard for us to move forward because we're so busy saying, you're a racist, but I'm not. You're prejudiced, but I'm not. You've got bias, but I don't, that we can't even see ourselves in the work. But let me tell you something. This thing can affect everyone, even no matter how progressive you think you are, no matter what kind of progressive home that you were raised in. And I know this from personal experience because I've seen it in my own children. My wife and I have 2 daughters. They're 14 and 12. But when they were 7 and 5, one Sunday afternoon, we're sitting around, and it's raining out, right? Can't really go to the park. So we're looking for a TV, looking for a movie to watch on the cable satellite deal or whatever, right? So we're flipping around the on-demand Comcast thing and looking at trailers, looking at commercials for different movies. And we come across the trailer for the movie Evan Almighty.
Hello, I am Evan Baxter.
Born June 15th, 1962, 8 pounds, 11 ounces. Mother's Carol Ann Parker. Father Eugene Evan Baxter.
Ooh, you have internet access. Very impressive. Do you also have cable?
You're a clean freak. You care much too much about your outward appearance. Your left nipple is a 1/4 inch higher than your right nipple, and when you were a little boy, you were afraid of Gumby.
Who are you?
I'm God.
You're God.
Yes.
Are you spying on me? Who are you?
I'm the one.
Huh?
Creator of the heavens and the earth, Alpha and Omega.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Bruce, I'm God.
Bingo!
If y'all remember that, it was comedy where Steve Carell plays a congressman and Morgan Freeman plays God, and Morgan Freeman tells Steve Carell that a big flood is coming and he should build an ark like Noah and ride it out. You know, it's sort of cute. It's like the modern retelling of the Noah and the ark story, I guess. You know? And as it turns out, my wife and 2 daughters had already seen the film at the theater, so they didn't necessarily want to watch it again that Sunday, but because they had seen it, they recognized the actors on the trailer, and they recognized some of the dialogue, right? So it got their attention. And the youngest of my daughters at that time, Rachel, right? She's 5 years old. She looks up and she does what any 5-year-old would do. She says, "Daddy, is that God?" pointing at Morgan Freeman, right? In the flowing white robes in the role of God. And I thought that was sort of cute because that's exactly what you would say at 5, right? I mean, like when you're 5, you don't know anything about the Screen Actors Guild or like casting directors, right? You just figure maybe God wanted to make a movie. And if God wanted to make a movie, odds are God could get the movie made. Like it wouldn't be hard for God. Now, one would hope that he would make a movie that, you know, got better than 23% on Rotten Tomatoes, but at least in theory, this could get done. So my 5-year-old asked the question. I sort of laugh at it. I'm like, "No, Rachel, no, that's not God. That's just an actor. That's Morgan Freeman. He plays God often. He'll probably be in this role again. He sort of gets it over and over and over. But it's just an actor playing a part." And she's like, "Oh, okay, good, cool." And I thought the conversation was over with, right? But it wasn't, because then the 7-year-old, Ashton, looks up. Now she's interested in this conversation. She looks up, she sees Morgan Freeman in the role of God, looks at her sister, starts to laugh, and she goes, "Rachel, that can't be God." And I knew in that moment 2 things, as surely as I knew my own name, right? One was that I was gonna have to ask her why not. And secondly, I already knew what her answer was gonna be before I ever asked her the question. But I knew I had to ask it. Now I was hoping for some help from my wife. So I looked to the left where she was sitting, and I got nothing at all, except the look that was like, "Yes, Marty, this would be your area of expertise. I really got nothing for you. I might take some pictures and scrapbook this precious moment, but beyond that, I got nothing." So I knew it was on me. I looked back at my daughter and I asked her the question. I said, "Why? Why can't that be God?" And in the moment before she answered, I had this fantasy, this really brief like blip of a fantasy in my brain where she was gonna give me a really great answer. Not the one I'm expecting, but one that I'm hoping for, like, "Well, Daddy, that can't be God because God is a woman." That would have been cool. That's not what she says. I'm also thinking maybe she'll say something like really deep and philosophical, like some existentialist answer like, "Oh, Father, what is God anyway?" But she was 7, so she didn't give me that.
Wells comes face to face with the man he's been searching for. A new portrait of the common ancestor of every man today. Adam. Without a skull, we can't know for sure what Adam looked like. But a combination of genetic evidence, vendors' forensic skills, and cutting-edge computer software suggests he looked something like this. Thousands of years after the Bible, and hundreds of years after Michelangelo, we have a whole new face for Adam.
I like the expression. He's got a very forceful look.
You know, he's intent on something, maybe taking over the world. You know, you begin to get perhaps an insight into why these guys won out and why this guy's our ancestor.
And this is how we can trace our way back to our genetic Eve and her daughters. So written within it is the history of the world's women, and therefore the human race. Professor Rebecca Kahn was the pioneering scientist who uncovered the first all-important clue.
I started working on human mitochondrial DNA so that I would have some kind of view that was objective, that would help me understand and help other people understand how humans around the world were related.
With this new science, she could. Harmless mutation happens all the time in some part of the mitochondrial DNA. leaving minute markers at every change. These markers are like barcodes and can be read in the same way. Khan and her team discovered the changes happen at a fairly constant rate. They found the groups with the earliest markers were the Africans living inside Africa and wondered if they might be the oldest people in the world.
I was very excited when I first started to get evidence, and it was so counterintuitive. I'd put 20 Europeans and 20 African Americans on a sheet of X-ray film, and every African American showed differences, and all the Europeans looked the same. And I thought I'd mislabeled something, or I thought I'd made some drastic mistake. And we kept repeating and repeating things, and as we got more samples from different areas, I realized that it was a difference in the pattern, and that this whole new type of evidence based on mitochondria was going to change the way we thought about modern humans.
Lupita's results contained something I'd never seen before. When we examined her mitochondrial DNA, the genetic fingerprint passed down from mother to daughter across generations, we found that she carries DNA from the oldest maternal haplogroup, a very ancient branch of the mtDNA tree, just adjacent to what scientists call the mitochondrial Eve, the most recent woman from whom all living humans today descend. When mitochondrial Eve was walking around, there were no human beings alive outside of Africa. Everybody was black in the whole world.
Huh. I predate race.
You predate race. Yeah.
That's dope.
In 1987, Khan and her colleagues published a paper showing for the first time that the markers stretched back to Africa, showing quite clearly that this was the birthplace of the human race. New Guinean tribesman, Parisian bartender, American teacher, Polynesian farmer, all were improbable relatives linked through one black woman 150,000 years ago. Their findings caused a sensation.
The responses of people were sort of amazing. The public was genuinely interested in certain aspects of it, but there was a tendency to misinterpret the data because of the terminology used to describe this woman, African Eve. And people thought it meant the biblical Eve, the single woman in the Judeo-Christian Bible of the wife of Adam. I have to say, even my own uncle sent me a Christmas card the year that our study was published saying, "How dare you, you know Grandma wasn't black."
Her work is rewriting human history. Through it, we now know the first mutations took place in Africa.
The CT scan has one more surprise for Alejandro: Shamai's ethnicity.
Well, they have just told me that Shamai had Nubian features, which means that their ruling family was probably Nubian, and that was unexpected.
Examining Shamai's anatomy closely, the thickness of his bones and the shape of his nasal cavity, the anthropologists think he was a black African, likely from neighboring Nubia. A huge revelation that challenges the prevailing image of the Egyptian ruling class.
We always thought the ancient Egyptian elite were Mediterranean type, and in this sense, Shammai is representing the society of the frontier, in which different ethnic groups were mixed. At the end, it doesn't matter the color of your skin. Shammai was Egyptian.
Professor Christopher Stringer, Britain's leading paleoanthropologist, was involved in the dating of the earliest modern human skulls.
This skull is as close as we can get to what the face of mitochondrial Eve would have looked like. It's a very complete skull found in sediments in a cave dating from about 120,000 years ago. We can see here that it's a modern human. We've got a high rounded vault to the skull, a face that's tucked in under the cranial vault.
And this is what she looked like. Using forensic reconstruction techniques, muscle and flesh have been added to the skull and provide us with the very first glimpse of how our genetic mother might have looked 150,000 years ago. This is the closest we can get. Their bones were discovered in Kafse caves near Nazareth in Galilee in 1933.
Instead, she gives me exactly what I knew she would. She says, that can't be God because God isn't black, God is white. Now, please know this, and it probably won't surprise you to learn if you didn't already know, we don't have any racialized images of a deity in our home. We don't have any images of a deity at all in our home, but certainly no racialized images of a God, right? We never allowed those awful, one might say god-awful if one was intended to giving puns, and right? Those god-awful children's Bible books that permeate the South. If you're from the South like I am, they have them in every damn pediatrician's office, right? The blue books, the Bible series, because, you know, that's what you need when you get your booster shot is a little God talk. That's really important, you know? So they have these god-awful blue children's Bible stories, the ones that make Adam and Eve look like they were in the Garden of Sweden, right? Right? Adam looks like Justin Bieber. I mean, like old school with the bob Justin Bieber, not like ripped and tattooed Justin Bieber. I mean, like old school Justin Bieber. It's absurd, right? The idea that the first human beings look like that, right? Obviously absurd. There's God, right, in the clouds, Santa in the sky, white dude, all the biblical characters in the Bible, children's books, white people, even though they were in a part of the world where there are no white people.
This story begins in October 1949. 1 year after Israel's formation. This is when Netanyahu was born, the second child of a historian. His paternal grandfather was a rabbi and a Zionist writer. His name was Nathan Milikowski. Later in life, he Hebraized his surname from Milikowski to Netanyahu, a name which means God has given.
This is Yair Netanyahu's DNA test that has been leaked. You can see right there his Y DNA is RM198. Descendants of RM198 come from Poland, Russia, Germany, and other European countries. Does this look Semitic to you? Does this look Middle Eastern?
You know, the DNA test that they've done on the Israelis that are living over there, they're Eastern European Ashkenazi Jews.
DNA testing to prove Jewish ancestry is a hot-button political issue in Israel. For example, Israel's chief rabbinate has pushed for the ancestry DNA tests to be allowed to prove Jewishness in certain cases. In particular, many Jews who have emigrated to Israel from the Soviet Union, who may not have had the necessary paperwork that shows they are Jewish, have sought to get genetic tests done to show they are Jews. In 2019, a political scandal erupted when it appeared Russian Jews were secretly submitting DNA tests to the rabbinate in order to obtain the right to move to Israel.
You say, well, where the name Ashkenazi came from? So, a little over 1,000 years ago, as Jewish people scattered around the world had now emigrated in Europe and now were living in the Rhineland in Germany, they looked at the name Gomer in Genesis 10, and they connected Gomer with Germany, so they took on the identity of the name Ashkenaz. It has nothing to do with Ashkenaz in the Bible, which is a descendant of Japhet. It's just a name that was taken, okay? It's that simple. Just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin, just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin,
just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin.
Michael Brown, I am Caucasian. Just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin or anything else. It was shortened from a Russian name when my grandfather came over at Ellis Island. The name got shortened to Brown. It's just a name. That's all it is. So the idea that Ashkenazi Jews are descended from Japhet is a myth, 100% false, zero truth to it. Just study the history.
You know, the DNA test that they've done on the Israelis that are living over there, they're Eastern European Ashkenazi Jews. I don't even think they're actual Semites. They don't have ancient Hebrew DNA.
Anyone ever heard of the word
Anti-Semitic. What's that mean? What's that mean? Against who? Against the who? Say it one more time. Against the who? If you're anti-Semitic, you're against Jews. Where'd that come from? You know, anti-Semitic, the word only goes back to the late 1800s. As it relates to being anti-Jewish. Now, don't throw your rocks at me. But how is it that only white Jews get to be referred to as Semitic? But how is it that only white Jews get to be referred to as Semitic?
But how is it that only white Jews get to be referred to as Semitic?
Just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin. Just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin.
Just like my last name Brown doesn't refer to the color of my skin.
Michael Brown, I am Caucasian.
I am Caucasian.
I am Caucasian.
But how is it that only white Jews get to be referred to as Semitic?
You can convert to Judaism. You can't convert to a blood family. You cannot convert to a race. Judaism is a religion. That's all it is. Judaism is a religion. That's all it is.
Judaism is a religion. That's all it is.
But how is it that only white Jews get to be referred to as Semitic?
Without getting too semantic, or at the risk of getting too semantic, does it matter that the Jews are not Semites, or does this phrase anti-Semitism just means hatred for the Jewish people? They're Ashkenazi, they're Eastern European Jews.
But how is it that only white Jews get to be referred to as Semitic?
They sat down to create a language because nations need languages. And we will try to convince the Jewish people, forget about this religion stuff, it's nationality. Support Israel, fight in the army, then you're a good Jew. That way, we will be real men. We will be purified of our Jewiness. We will be purified of our Jewiness.
Of our Jewiness.
Of our Jewiness. Of our Jewiness.
But how is it that only white Jews get to be referred to as Semitic?
They're not Semites at all. They're not Semites at all.
They're not Semites at all.
In fact, most of them are communists from Russia.
But how is it that only white Jews get to be referred to as Semitic?
I just had a rabbi give me an analogy. He said, look, imagine you left your home and then someone came and occupied it and then you try to get it back and then they went to the judge. Have you heard some of these analogies? Maybe you can.
Yeah, that's assuming that, you know, that's taking it into a place which I don't usually go. That's making the assumption that today's Jews are really the descendants of the ancient Hebrews that used to live in that part of the world some 3,000 years ago.
But how is it that only white Jews get to be referred to as Semitic?
You know what you are? You're an ancient Israelite.
Ancient Israelite, that's who we are. That's who we are. So if you give me time, if you give me time, how old are you saying?
I know. We don't have
so many years.
I know. Look at this. This is pages and pages of notes. And I promise we'll give more teaching. But here is my challenge to you.
All right.
I'm hearing some of your traditions. It's like the days of the Bible.
Yes.
Do you want to remain ancient Israelites or you want to be Jews? Do you want to remain ancient Israelites or you want to be Jews? Do you want to remain ancient Israelites or you want to be Jews?
Some of the stuff I was saying was true. So until y'all come up and say, yo, what he was saying, some of that was true, then go ahead with all that.
Do you take back any of the anti-Semitic stuff you might have said?
Black people can't be anti-Semitic. We are Jew.
And that, my friends, is called hypocrisy. A black man can steal your stereo, but he can't be your savior.
Again, I'm gonna repeat. I don't know how the label becomes justified because you guys ask me the same questions over and over again. But this is not gonna turn into a spin around cycle, questions upon questions. I told you guys how I felt. I respect all walks of life and embrace all walks of life. That's where I sit.
I think what people want to hear, though, is just a yes or no on that question. Yes or no.
I cannot be anti-Semitic if I know where I come from.
The entire Bible is about black people. Not only was Jesus black, but every character in the Bible seems to be black too. yeah, Zephaniah and Jeremiah and Jebediah, those all aren't white people names, okay? And Jesus wasn't some tan, partially melanated Middle Eastern person either. I'm talking straight up black dude, okay? Even in the book of Revelation, when you get the vision of Daniel, he's describing someone with feet like burnt brass and white woolly hair, and we've got the deep running water voice with the red eyes, and you guys, he's black. The Jewish people are black people, like Kanye was right.
So
That's been proved.
So the Jewish people in Israel will be referred to as the descendants of the Jewish people in Africa, and not the other way around.
Not on the other way. Difficult to make it admitted by them. Difficult to make it admitted by them. Difficult to make it admitted by them.
Black people can't be anti-Semitic. We are Jew. You understand what I'm saying? We are Jew. So cool out. Until you do your facts, until you really do the facts with the fake indoctrination that y'all pull into the schools and all that, you know what I'm saying? We're not following y'all rules.
Hitler was, and the Nazis, of course, expanded on Margaret Sanger's approach to eugenics, right? Eugenics was a movement that was born in the United States under hard doctrines of racism with the intent of eliminating the tribe of Judah in the African-American community in this country, right? To eliminate them. With the intent of eliminating the tribe of Judah,
with the intent of eliminating the tribe of Judah in the African American community in this country, right? To eliminate them.
Right? So even though we don't have that in our home, my child has nonetheless already at the age of 7 somehow internalized the idea that the creation source of the universe, whether taken in religious terms or humanistic and more naturalistic terms, is somehow closer to her than to Morgan Freeman. And if my daughter has internalized that, what do you think black and brown children internalize when they see the same imagery? And they see those images. They see them in the stained glass of our churches. You see them in the Christmas cards that get sent around every holiday season where baby Jesus is in the manger in what apparently is Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, rather than the other Bethlehem. Right? Lily white Jesus, which makes no sense anthropologically, biologically, historically, makes no sense at all. But our children see those images and it can affect them. Now, if you were to try to break into my house and hurt my children, I would kill you. Without hesitation. I don't even have a gun, but I would find something and I would throw it at you and you would die. Like, it's just that simple. I would make sure that you died, right? If you were to try to hurt my kids. I'm not saying that because I'm a badass. I'm just saying I'm just letting you know, don't mess with my children. But the problem, right? The problem is that there is something coming into that house. And it is hurting my children, and it's hurting all of our children, and it's hurting us, and I didn't even know it was there. See, the doors are locked at night, the windows are shut, the alarm is on, and whatever this thing is doesn't know the code, but the dirty little secret is it doesn't need to. It weasels its way into our children's brains and affects them. That's how I know that we've all ingested this poison, and we better own that if we're gonna have an honest dialogue. It's not about feeling guilty about it. In fact, that's the beauty of it, right? If we've all been subjected to it, there's no reason to feel guilty, because we could not have helped but ingest it. The question is, what do we do now? How do we take responsibility, which is not the same as guilt? Responsibility is what you take because of the kind of person you are. Guilt is what you feel for the stuff you've actually done. Those are two different things. We take responsibility for things even when we're not to blame for them. So that's the first piece. The second piece, the systemic piece, right? Our inability or our lack of willingness to admit that there's also a systemic element to racism, that it's not just about personal prejudice. If it were, it'd be so much easier, right? Because we could just educate people out of their biases, right? And we could somehow undo their personal stuff and everything would be fine. But there's a bigger problem, and it's systemic. It's the way that policies and practices and everyday procedures reinforce inequality between different racial groups.
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10.
explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was Abraham, born in the city of a black man, called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was the... Jacob had 12 sons, for real, and these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10.